Welcome back, everyone. It's time for the final round of breakout sessions in Translating Europe Forum 2025 Newcomers Fair. This session is called From Text to Tech, a translator's leap into the translation technology world with Randy Scansani. A quick reminder again, your mics are muted, so please use the Q&A feature for questions and upvote the questions you think are important. You can use the chat for other conversation. Let's begin. I'm happy to introduce Randy Scansani, who will talk about technical skills useful for translators and how these skills can open up new career opportunities. Please, Randy.
Thank you very much, Riikka. Thanks for the introduction. And hello, everyone. I'm very glad to be here. So thanks for the organizers for having me, of course, and thank you very much, all of you, for being here after what I guess was a very intense week. So I hope you still have the strength to follow me during this presentation. And so I will now start sharing my screen and start with my presentation. As Riikka was saying, we will talk about the competencies needed for transitioning into the translation technology world if you are starting from a translation background. So a few words about myself to start. So who am I? So I hold a master's degree in specialized translation from the University of Bologna. And after that, I did a PhD in machine translation and post-editing at the University of Bologna, together with in cooperation with the FBK, Fondazione Bruno Kessler from Trento, a PhD on machine translation and post-editing from the perspective of the final user, so of translators using machine translation and doing post-editing. And starting from my PhD onwards, I started as well to work in the translation industry, in the language service providers industry first, with different roles in the field of machine translation / natural language processing / AI. And today, a few months ago, I've joined Phrase as a solutions engineer. So right now I'm working as a solutions engineer at Phrase. For those of you who do not know, Phrase is a company providing translation technologies. And so let me talk about what I did along the way, what I did in these steps, in the different steps that I've mentioned in my career. Not because I like to talk about myself, I really don't usually, but just to give you an idea of what your path could look like if you are, again, transitioning into the translation technology world. And this is really to show you that it's a step-by-step approach, right? It's not that you need to acquire a lot of competencies immediately after your master's degree or bachelor's degree to be able to work in the translation technology field. So in my case, for example, I started from a master's in translation, during which, of course, I learned how to translate different content types, how to translate in 2 different target languages. And I also acquired knowledge about CAT tools and about corpus linguistics and about machine translation and post-editing. So this is where my journey towards translation technology started. And then during my PhD, I developed a strong understanding, theoretical understanding of natural language processing and the different tasks of natural language processing. And I started to gain some foundational programming skills, which afterwards, in all my following experiences, I developed more and more. So I started with some foundational programming skills and then used them more and more, and transitioned into a role, that of the AI engineer, where I was coding 99% of my day at work. And the same for my theoretical understanding of natural language processing / AI / machine learning. I started to apply it to my job and then learn how to apply it in practice as well, and train machine learning models throughout the years. So it's really like you should take it as a journey to transition from your background in translation and start working on translation technology. So in the remainder of the presentation, I'm going to talk about which skills, based on my experience and based like also in my opinion, you would need to transition into the translation technology world, why these skills matter. And then I will also provide perhaps some suggestions on how you can acquire such skills. So let's start by talking about how you can like organize the skills. I've split them into 3 categories. One is translation tools and processes. The other one is programming. And the third one is that of machine learning / AI and natural language processing. All of these 3 categories are important, are relevant. There are some jobs where perhaps one of these category is more relevant than the other 2, but still I think like these 3 altogether would make up your background, and all of them are relevant. So let's start by looking at the first category and what exactly I mean by this category. What are the skills that I think belong to these categories and this category, and why I think they matter in your day-to-day activities. So the first skill, of course, would be to know and understand what it means to translate. And by that, I mean understanding the challenges of translation, understanding why, for example, translating financial content is not the same thing as translating a marketing content or the same thing as translating a legal content. So what are the different challenges? And also what are the challenges, for example, related to a specific language pair? Once you build these competencies, and I'm pretty sure that most of you already have those competencies, and some of you are perhaps in the process of acquiring them, which is of course fine. But anyways, once you understand that, this is already a very, very good starting point, because it lets you understand why translation and languages in general is not a solved problem for machines. So despite the claims that you might hear today that translation is a solved problem for machines, it is not. And if you know about translation, you know that. And then you should also understand what CAT tools are and how they are used, and what terminology management is, and what a software for terminology management does, and how it can be used. Why does all of that matter? Well, I've already explained why it matters to understand what it means to translate. Of course, about CAT tools and terminology management tools, these are especially relevant because if you work on translation technologies, translation memories and term base are going to be the data sets that you're going to use very, very often to extract data from them. So knowing how they are built, how they are populated, how they are maintained is going to give you the competencies to manipulate them efficiently and effectively, and analyze its content effectively. And in general, if you know about translation and translation processes, it means that you know basically what happens from the moment when you receive a source text from a customer to the moment when you send the target text, the translated target text, back to your customer. This is going to be a big plus for you. This is going to be the competence that make you stand out from the crowd, because and I'm not saying this as a criticism, it's just a matter of fact. In the translation technology world, there are many engineers working on translation technologies, and of course, they have a different background, right? So you shouldn't just focus on AI and machine learning. You should also focus on these competencies that you acquire in the translation field, because this is what is going to make you stand out from the rest of the people working in that field. Just to give you a very practical example, suppose that one day you will have to build an application that uses AI to rephrase a text. For example, rephrasing a text to make it more adequate for a specific audience. If you know about translation processes, you will be the one able to advise, for example, on whether it makes more sense to rephrase the source content and then send the rephrased content to translation, or whether it makes more sense to rephrase the target content. And so you will be able to describe these options to perhaps your customers and explain the pros and cons of both options. And then the second macro category would be that of programming. And here, the first item on the list are regular expressions with a couple of asterisks next to it. Asterisks mean, they don't mean that I hate regular expressions, which most of translators do, and not only translators. But it means that I know that regular expressions do not really belong to the programming field, are not a programming language per se, perhaps, but they fit well in this category. Maybe I should have found a better name for the category, but I wasn't able to. So yeah, forgive me for that. But regular expressions are basically a syntax for those of you who don't know regular expressions. It's a syntax that you can use to find patterns in a text. For example, suppose that you need to find all occurrences in a text of a dot separating two numbers. If you're manipulating a very, very large file, you cannot possibly do that manually, right? So you would need a syntax that help you to identify these occurrences automatically. And then the second competence would be being able to use the bash shell. So this is something that all of you have on your laptop. Maybe you have never used it, but you have it on your laptop. If you are on a Mac or if you are on an Ubuntu machine, you will have the bash shell. If you are on a Windows machine, I think it's called prompt or terminal. Anyways, it's more or less the same thing. And it helps you manipulate large files so that you can open a file or extract content from a file without the need of opening it inside a text editor or inside any other software. Because if it's a very large file, the text editor is going to crash. And believe me, it will. It's going to happen very often to you. So if you are able to use the bash shell to do even very simple operations like extracting a column from a file or applying regular expressions to a file using the bash shell, this is going to be very useful. And then, of course, you would need to know at least one programming language. And here, usually, the advice that I would give is to start from Python, because it's a quite simple programming language to learn. And also because it's widely used in the field of natural language processing and in the field of machine learning. So why does all of that matter in this macro category? Well, because about regular expressions, I more or less already give you a good motivation, right? Suppose that you need to find occurrences of a dot separating two numbers, for example, because you need to replace it with a comma. So that you can have 0,5 instead of 0.5. If you do that manually, that's going to take a lot of time, right? And you will miss some occurrences for sure if it's a large file. If you just look for all the dots, you're going to break sentences in your file. So you need to use regular expressions to find exactly the cases where a dot is separating two numbers. And then if you are able to use a programming language, you will be able, for example, to parse any kind of file. Just to give you an example, translation memories and term bases, I was mentioning them before as a source of data for you that you are going to use very, very often in your daily activities. Both translation memories and term bases, they rely on a file format that is based on XML. So by using a programming language, you can parse an XML file to extract the text from it and to analyze the content, for example, or to build a data set from a very, very large translation memory. You know, to train a machine learning model, you would need to build your training data set that is going to be used to train the model and a testing data set that you are going to use to test the model. And this is going to become your bread and butter because thanks to your competencies, meaning thanks to your background of a person who understands a content, who is able to deeply understand all the nuances of a content, you are going to be asked oftentimes perhaps to build data sets and analyze data sets. And being able to use a programming language to do that is going to be key for your career. And then the third macro category is that of machine learning / NLP / AI. Nowadays, everything is AI, but NLP and machine learning are still like a subcategory, and they are both relevant today, even though they are not called like that very often anymore. So in this category, what you would need to learn, in my opinion, is first of all, you would need to learn the basic concepts of machine learning. So what it means to train a machine learning model, what it means, for example, to train a machine translation model. How does a machine translation model learn how to translate during training? And how does a machine translation model translate in real time? So what happens under the hood from a theoretical point of view when you train a machine learning model and when you use a machine learning model. And then you would need to learn about the main applications of NLP, natural language processing. What do I mean by that? Well, so for example, you should know what is domain classification or what is sentiment analysis or text summarization. So all these applications of natural language processing, you would at least need to have a theoretical understanding. And this implies also developing a knowledge and studying evaluation metrics and evaluation methods. So when you apply NLP, for example, to identify the domain of a text, so if it's a financial text or a marketing text, you need to evaluate the output of that model. And evaluating the output of a model that just outputs a label for a text is, of course, very, very different from evaluating the output of a model that is trained to translate a text or to summarize a text. So each task has its own metrics and methods for the evaluation. And why am I stressing that? I am stressing that because, of course, this is going to be something where in your career you can excel. So I know that I sound like a broken record, right? But you need to focus on the competencies that would make you stand out from the rest of the engineers working in the field. And you already have these competencies, what I was mentioning before, the competencies of understanding a content with all its nuances and understanding the quality of a text. So this is going to be relevant because you're a perfect fit to evaluate models and apply evaluation metrics and understand the limits and strength of each evaluation each evaluation metric. So let's now talk for a second about how you can learn all of this. So I've already mentioned quite a few skills, right? So before I start to talk about how you can learn all of this, let me reiterate on what I was saying at the beginning. I don't want to scare you. I know that I'm mentioning a lot of skills. What I mean is not that you need to acquire all these skills today to be able to work in the translation technology field. So don't be scared. It's just, these are all the skills that you would need, I think, in your career, but it can be a step-by-step process where you start from some basic knowledge and then you build on top of that. And as you will see during your career, most of the things that you will learn are the things that you're going to learn hands-on, right? So you start from a basic knowledge and then you build on that. And most of what you will learn is also what is going to happen to you during your career, because your colleagues are teaching you something, or because you end up working for a company that needs you to develop specific competencies. So anyways, about translation tools, I know that many of you already have quite a good knowledge. But just to give you a few examples, if you want to know more about CAT tools, for example, many CAT tools, all the main CAT tools actually offer courses and certifications online for free. STL Studio does that, MemoQ does that, Phrase does that, so you can pick one. And there are also free and online CAT tools that you can use to get you started, to familiarize with what a CAT tools does, to create your first translation project and build a translation memory and populate a translation memory, and so on and so forth. So just to start playing around with that and get an idea, wrapping your head around how they work. About programming, this is really one of the fields where you can find a lot of courses and resources online. I'm just providing a few examples, but this is really not an exhaustive list. So W3 Schools, for example, is a good website to learn about Python. Kaggle and DataCamp are also two very good resources. And Kaggle, for example, is a platform where you can also learn by doing and where you can participate to challenges. For example, like a coding task where everyone competes and to see who is going to finish it in the shortest time, for example, or to find the best solution. But the best advice that I can give you is really like put what you are learning into practice and learn by doing. When I was learning how to program, I found a lot of similarities between learning how to translate and learning how to write code in a programming language. So both of them are languages anyways. And it's in both cases, you really need to like gain some foundational theoretical concepts, but then you really have to practice and practice and practice to understand the logic behind it, to understand the mechanisms behind it. So try and apply what you learn to your tasks at hand, even if at the beginning it's going to take more time to automate a task with a small script than doing it manually. Just take the time to do that, and that's how you will learn a lot. And then as of today, you can also rely on large language models, GPT or Claude or whatever you use, to fix your code and understand what you are doing wrong, right? Of course, they are not always right, but often they give you like a good advice on how to fix your code. Again, also for machine learning and NLP and AI, you can find a lot of resources online. There are some very good courses, for example, on deeplearning.ai or on Coursera. Kaggle and DataCamp also provide good courses. There are books online, and especially in the LLM/AI field, there are free courses by Google, by AWS, by Cohere. So these are all things that you can do, and most of them are for free. And again, you can learn by doing. So as soon as you learn about a new algorithm that you didn't know about before, you can start and practice with it and break things and practice until you don't break things anymore. And that's just how it works. So now I wanted to also spend a few minutes talking about what skills you can aim for. Sorry, which jobs you can aim for based on your skills. And so as you will see, well, let me just switch to the slide and we can directly look at the different jobs. So, and first of all, a disclaimer. This is not an exhaustive list, right? It's just to give you some examples, just to let you understand that there are different roles that all belong to the translation technology field. And as I was saying at the beginning, when I was talking about the three macro categories of programming, AI/NLP, and translation tools and processes, there are roles where one category is more relevant than the other two, but still you need to have a basic knowledge of the other two because it's always relevant. So, for example, if your focus is more on translation and localization, if this is like the area of translation tools and processes is the one where you excel, is the one where you would like to work, then there are some very interesting roles, for example, as a localization engineer or localization QA engineer. So someone who is going to build localization pipelines, is going to test localization pipelines. So the technology part is still super relevant because localization pipelines nowadays, 99% of the time, they involve translation technologies, perhaps 99.9% of the times actually. But you still have to have a very good knowledge of translation and translation processes and what it means to translate a content. And for those of you who don't know, QA means quality assurance. So it's the process of ensuring that a translated content or a content written in a written content in general is of good quality. You can work as a solutions engineer as well. This would also belong to the roles where you need to have a strong understanding of translation processes. And this is the job that I do today at Raise, for example. And there are solutions engineer also specifically focused on localization and AI. And this is a role where you act as a consultant for a customer. You try to understand their needs in terms of localization and translation technologies, and you try to build a pipeline to solve their problems. And then there are what I called here hybrid roles where the technology part and the programming part in particular is even more relevant, but still you need to know about translation and localization. And these roles are computational linguist, which is usually a role where you are required to build data sets for machine learning and AI, or to evaluate models or to annotate data. And another role is that of a machine translation specialist, where you usually train machine translation models, evaluate machine translation models, and perhaps also provide technical support to people using machine translation, like translators or project managers. And another interesting role could be that of a solutions architect, which is kind of similar to the solutions engineer, but it's more applied. So you act as a consultant for your customer, but instead of just providing consultancy, you are actually like building pipelines, pipelines and not just prototyping them. And then to finish with the highly technical jobs, so what I call here technical/AI focused roles. For example, if you are an NLP or AI or MT researcher or research scientist, it means that you are the person trying to find innovative ways to use machine learning, or perhaps to make the training process more efficient, to test new algorithms, to test new ideas that you got from research paper. If you are working as an engineer, on the other hand, you are the person who is testing these new models and packaging them and shipping them to production. So these are the, let's say, fully technical roles, but still roles where if you have knowledge about localization, about translation, this is going to be a big plus for you. This is going to be a differentiator for your career. So let me just conclude with a few thoughts, just to reiterate on what I've already talked about, and then we will look at your questions. So it's possible to transition from the translation word to the translation technology words. You do not have to care about that. Of course, it's possible, and the sky is the limit. You can become an engineer, or you can focus on another type of role. But anyways, so the point is that technologies need more than just engineers. So there are also other roles that might be relevant for you and that you might find as interesting as working as an engineer or a research scientist. So these hybrid roles that I was mentioning, solutions engineer in the field of solutions engineering or localization engineering, can be just as powerful and as interesting for you. So don't just focus on becoming a very technical person, but never forget where you came from. So never forget that you have competencies in translation and in language, in foreign languages. And so you can be a person that is not an engineer with a slight interest in languages, but you are a linguist with a strong technology focus. So my advice would be to take your time to improve your skills, and along the way try to understand what you like to do. And I'm sure you will find the sweet spot between the translation world and the engineering world. So thank you very much for your attention, and I believe we can now look at the Q&A box. So the first question by Remy is, who can best help you focus on what specific skills you need in the next phase of your career? Okay. So this is a good question. So I think it's not a matter of who can best help you focus on what skills you need in the next phase of your career. It's more on what you would like to achieve, right? So I think, like, as I was saying, it's what is going to happen to you is that you are going to start with a job, and during that job, you will see that you need specific skills, right? And you are going to focus on them, and then you will see that you will start understanding, like, what are the skills that you like most. So, like, for example, in my case, what was very important is to, like, talk to my colleagues or talk to other people working in the same field and get their advice and get their opinion on where I could grow, right? So like talking to each other and talking to your colleagues and understand where you can grow. This is, I think, where you should focus. I hope this answered your question. Okay, and then the second question is by Remy as well. Best institute or learning platform to learn all of these new skills needed. Yeah, I already provided some suggestions. So maybe this question came before I talked about that. So there are quite a huge number of websites or platforms where you can learn all of that. For example, Kaggle or DataCamp or W3 Schools, and also all the books, the book series, the For Dummies book series, like Python for Dummies or Machine Learning for Dummies. These are also very good books that you can usually find quite easily, and they help you at least to get started. And about CAT tools, you can start using CAT tools online. For example, MadeCat is for free, and you can use it online and start to practice with it, and then perhaps take a few certifications from Trados Studio or MemoQ or Phrase or any other CAT tool offering courses. All right, and then the next question is, what are the biggest challenges for staying relevant in the industry in the short and long term? How to balance the short-term growth with the long-term career planning? This is a very good question and also a tough one. So what are the biggest challenges for staying relevant? The biggest challenge, in my opinion, as of today, is to stay up to date with what is happening in the AI world. Because lots of things are happening, lots of things are changing. So you really need to develop this ability to perhaps like follow the right people on social media, for example, or like follow everything new that is being published by relevant companies or relevant research institutes or research groups to understand where the world is going. So this is, I think, the biggest challenge, together with acquiring the ability to discern what is happening in the world and is relevant from what is just a marketing claim, right? So there are many things that are happening, but not all of them are going to be relevant for your job, relevant for the translation technology world. So this is these are the two main challenges, in my opinion. And if you are able to always be up to date, I think this is going to help you a lot, both in the short term and in the long term. And how to balance the growth in the short term versus that in the long term. I think like the balance is always to try and focus on what are the competencies that you need the most today. So if today you don't know, for example, anything about programming, which is fine, I would start looking into that and start understanding what it means to programming and how you can use that. So this is what I would focus on the short term, on the things that you would need the most, on the things that you don't know anything about. And then in the long term, what is really like the long-term planning should really, the focus there should really be on what you would like to become in the end. So where you want to go, and that target might move, right? For example, in my case, until not long ago, I thought I wanted to be an engineer, and then until some months ago, I was working as an AI engineer, and now I'm working as a solutions engineer, which is completely different. Before I was coding most of my time, and then I'm doing completely different activities. So like always bear in mind where you want to go, but it doesn't need to be a hard constraint, right? Because things change, and most of your career is, in my opinion, is what happens to you while you try to achieve your goal. And then the other question is, have you seen this applied to multimodal image, audio, video products, or is that still too much to ask? So I think this is referring to machine learning slash AI. And yes, multimodality is already there. So there are already products, for example, that you can use to transcribe the content of a video or of an audio file, and to translate it in multiple languages. So this is a very, very, very interesting niche. So if you're interested into that, you can perhaps look at the you can search for the available solutions in the field, for example, of text to speech, or speech to text, or of video transcription and video subtitling. You will see that there's already a world there to be explored. And if you're interested into that, you will find lots of interesting products and lots of interesting research papers to read. And I think we have the last question here. do you think it's becoming impossible to succeed as a translator without some technical knowledge? Or is there still room in the industry for purely linguistic expertise? And if we want to start building that tech side, are there any specific Coursera courses you'd recommend to get a better understanding? Whoa, this is a very good question. I hope I am up to the task of answering this. So, do you think it's let's break it down into smaller parts, because there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. Do you think it's becoming impossible to succeed as a translator without some technical knowledge? So yeah, I have to be completely honest with you. Today, I think as a translator, you do need to have some technical knowledge. So even though, like, if you want to work as a translator, perhaps you do not need to be able to program, for example. So you do not need to be able to use Python proficiently, but you still need to know what machine learning is, and, for example, how machine translation works, how large language models work, and what it means to post-edit. So these are the kind of technical knowledge that, as of today, is required anyways. I don't think as of today you can do without that, to be honest. And this is going to become even more true in the near future. But of course, if you like, purely linguistic expertise is important and is fully relevant. So if your aim is to work as a translator, of course, purely linguistic expertise is still completely relevant in the industry. It's just that you also have, in my opinion, to know a little bit about machine learning, machine translation, and post-editing, and all the technologies that are now today applied to translation. And the last part of your question is, if we want to start building that tech side, are there any specific Coursera courses you'd recommend to get a better understanding? So I was mentioning, for example, the deep learning AI courses. So you can check the website, deeplearning.ai, and their courses are also on Coursera. So if you look for those courses on Coursera, you will find very good courses for beginners about machine learning, about natural language processing as well. So yeah, those are the ones I would recommend and these are the ones I also started from and found them very, very useful. Okay, and I think that concludes the questions. I think we've answered all of them.
Thank you, Randy, and thank you all for coming to the Translating Europe Forum 2025 Newcomers Fair. It's been great having you here, and we hope that you have enjoyed this afternoon with us. We hope to see you again next year at Translating Europe Forum 2026, either online or in Brussels. And please keep an eye on our multilingual workshops. We organize over 60 of those across all EU countries throughout the year. You can watch the recordings of all the sessions on our YouTube channel, Translating for Europe, starting from early next week. And one final request, please let us know how you like the event by filling a short survey while leaving this session. Thank you once again and have a wonderful evening.